Okie dokie. So, welcome to lesson 3 of This Can Happen. Of course, about obviously the resurrection of the dead, and we are going to be talking about the resurrection of the dead. I want to first thank you for coming. I want to thank those who sponsored and made this possible. Let's say l'chaim, a toast to them that they should have only blessings, success, and happiness in their lives. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
Those who are watching the recording, please take a moment to share something or think about something of gratitude. And those who are here are going to share for everyone. Let's start. Leib Moshe, what are you grateful for today?
I guess I'm grateful for just God giving me life in my body to wake up this morning and to be on this earth and enjoy life.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Leib Moshe. Thank you. Auntie Nina, what are you grateful for?
Oh, okay. I'm grateful for being here with you and seeing you, my darling nephew and all my other darling nephews that give me comfort to know that my darling sister is really shipping a lot of nachas from them. Yeah.
Thank
nice
you.
To see. I mean, faces that I've seen before. I'm the oldest here, so I'm not going to say old faces. Faces that I've seen before. It's nice.
Familiar faces.
Familiar is the word.
Okie dokie. Okay. Reb George, what's your Hebrew name? What's your Yiddish name?
Hebrew, Asaf Yisrael. Asaf
Yisrael. Beautiful. Asaf Yisrael. What are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful that I safely drove an 11-hour drive from Los Angeles to Southern Oregon, where I'm going to be for the next 2 months, and that there's a Chabad here for all the high holidays in September.
Beautiful.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Very, very nice. Nechama, if you'd like to, you could unmute yourself and share something that you're grateful for today. Welcome, Malki. We're going a round of gratitude. People are sharing something that they are grateful for today. If you'd like to, if you're comfortable, please share with us what's something that you are grateful for today.
Everyone here is healthy. It just looks like I'm purple, so I'm going to take it off. But thanks for having me here. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, excuse me, Malki, where are you now? You live in Brazil, yes?
Yes, yeah, in Rio de Janeiro. Ah, here you go. A bit better.
There we go, much better. Okay, so let's get straight into it, and as people come, they will join. So I would like
You're gone.
the other classes. You can't hear me?
No,
Now I can.
the voice cut out.
Yeah, you can. So I'm not sure what's been going on. Happened last time also, that for some reason there's something with my internet. So if I cut out, you'll let me know. This course is dedicated to our mother, who lived her life for Mashiach. It was everything she stood for, everything that she learned about, every day, everything that happened. The way she answered the phone, the way she did everything was all about Mashiach. And before we start tonight, I want to share something that she shared at one of our other classes, which I think is very relevant. You know what? No, it's not gonna come through well in the clip. She was saying how Mashiach is compared to a birth. And just like what happens is that, pregnancy starts out in the beginning, it's all fine. Then you get morning sickness. And then the end is, it's hard to schlep around. Then it's, everything hurts and painful. And she asked, what is the most difficult part of childbirth? And I've never had a child before, but those who have can agree with her that the most difficult part is not the contractions, is not everything that's going on, not the carrying around the baby for 9 months, but the most difficult part of childbirth is the moment right before the baby is born. When the baby is crowned, the baby's head is engaged, it's right there, and the pain and the pressure, and that's when you just lose it. But when that happens, that's right when you know that the baby's about to come. And she said the same thing is over here. We're promised that Mashiach is going to come, and we're promised that Mashiach is going to come, and we're doing all our mitzvahs to bring Mashiach. And it seems to be getting harder and harder, and the world seems to be getting more and more chaotic. But know that just because it's hard doesn't mean that it's not coming. The fact that it's so hard means that Mashiach is right around the corner. So let's hold on just another few moments, and we will see Mashiach. That being said, today's class is called Quantum Leap. We're going to be discussing, all of us have areas in our life that we are stuck, and we are going to be discussing a quantum leap through the lens of the resurrection of the dead. So to recap, we've spoken about the foundation of the resurrection of the dead, where it's sourced in the Torah, that it's a foundation of Yiddishkeit. We spoke about the Rambam and the Ramban, whether the resurrection of the dead is going to be temporary or permanent. And we spoke about the permanence of it and about how Mashiach comes. It will be clear to everyone that the purpose of everything is physical mitzvahs in a physical world. Last week we covered about the luz bone. We spoke about the way that the resurrection of the dead, that the luz bone, which cannot be destroyed by anything, will be softened by the dew of the Tchias HaMesim, and that's how the people will be rebuilt. And we explored how the reason why it's so outlandish and makes no sense is because anything that has a reason is defined by a reason and is not deep and is not essential. The deepest things are the things that have no reason and have no explanation. So today, we are going to speak about one detail that we haven't yet gotten to. It's something which is very puzzling, and its truth will radically change the trajectory of our lives here and now today. So let's start. I'm going to ask you all a question. This is a poll. This is not a judging question. This is a curious question. Taking a poll, there's no right or wrong answer. And it's going to be a yes or no question. I hope I'm going to phrase it in a way that's going to be easy to be yes or no. The question is, all the people who died are going to come back to life. But what about the people who are living? Us all here now. Mashiach is going to come now. Then there's going to be the resurrection of the dead. Are we going to just segue into a life forever, even though we were born before the resurrection? Or is there going to be some process that's going to have to happen for us to live forever? So if you think that we are just going to segue in and remain alive forever, you can either raise your hand or say yes. Okay? And if you think that something is going to have to happen first before we can, if there's going to be some kind of process that's going to have to happen, raise your hand and or say no. Okay. So we have varying opinions about what is going to happen, but the good news is that we don't have to guess about this. We don't have to take any guesswork. We don't have to try and figure it out on our own because it has already been decided for us. Let's look at text number 1. Just a moment. I do not have a PDF of this for today, so I'm going to be reading the text. If you have the textbook, can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. So I'm going to be reading the text. If you have the textbook, it's on page 38. The Zohar. This is from the Zohar. The Zohar says, until the redemption, death is a result of negative forces. From then on, it is as the verse states, only God will give life and death. I don't like that translation. The translation is Ani amit va'achayeh. I will make die and I will bring to life. Which means that it's not only in God's power, but God will kill and revive. This teaches us that in that time, concerning all those who have not yet tasted death, God will give them a taste and immediately revive them. What do we see from here? That there is going to be a process. Those who have died will come back alive, and those who are alive will. Those who are alive, you hear me? We're back good? No? You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Those who are alive will have to die and then come back to life. So I want to bear with me just a moment. I want to bring up a story from the Gemara, which is a fascinating read.
Excuse me, Rabbi, if I may.
Yes,
We
please.
discussed the loose bone last week. Is the loose bone impervious to heat and fire?
Is it? That's what we learned last week. Yes.
Okay,
Why do you ask?
I just didn't recall that because the people who died in the Holocaust, whose bodies were burned after they were gassed.
So that's a very good question. It's a very good question. Okay, here we are. Just a moment, and I've got this over here.
Rabbi Shmuley?
Oops, where is this? Yes.
Rabbi Shmuley, I
Yes.
heard somewhere that after the gas chambers, when they were sweeping them out, there were little bits of bones that were not, that were intact, and they didn't know what they were.
Oh wow. Great. I mean, not great, but thank you for sharing that.
Okay, but also those who watch Jurassic Park should know how it can be done.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm not pulling this up right here. Okay, so the Gemara tells a story, and Rabbi Shalom maybe can fill me in if I'm missing out some details. The Gemara tells us that the workers of Rabbi Chia were digging in the field, and there was a corpse that came to them and told them off. So this is a Gemara that says that the bodies decompose, but the bodies of tzaddikim, the bodies of the righteous people, remain intact. So these workers of Rabbi Chia were working in the field, and they were rebuked by a corpse. So they came to Rabbi Chia and they told them, we were just rebuked by a corpse. Apparently there was someone buried on his property. So he came out to see what's going on. So he comes out and he has this whole conversation with this dead body. The first thing he says is, who are you? They told him his name. I don't remember. It was one of the Amoraim, one of the Talmudic scholars. So Rabbi Chia asked him, how could you be here? The verse says that everyone returns to the dust. So this corpse said to him, I mean, there was no mincing words over here. It's a fascinating back and forth. I wish I had it on the screen for you. He says to him, well, apparently you didn't listen when they were teaching scriptures. The verse says, anyone who has envy in his, whoever has envy in his heart, his bones will rot. So anybody who never had envy, their bones will not rot. Anyways, Rabbi Chia said, well, sir, Rabbi, if we're anyways schmoozing, why don't you come inside for some tea? And he said, it looks like not only you weren't listening when they were teaching in Ezekiel, but you weren't listening when they were teaching from Job either. That the dead will not, I don't remember the exact words, but that the dead will, those who were sent to the grave will stay there until they are called by God. Which means that I have to stay here by my grave until God calls me. I can't leave yet until Mashiach comes. So Rabbi Chia was still very perplexed. At the end of this, they had a whole conversation. And at the end, Rabbi Chia says to him, but still, how could you go against the verse in Genesis, that Genesis 3, in Bereshis, the pasuk says that Hashem made the earth, made a person from the earth. And the implication is that we are going to have to return to the earth. So how come you didn't decompose yet? And the rabbi told him, as that is, that 1 hour before the resurrection of the dead, all of the righteous will decompose. So the story, thrilling and mysterious as it is, but gives us another perspective over here that not only the Zohar, but this story in the Gemara tells us that those who have not decomposed will decompose before Tchias HaMesim. Now, I didn't get a joke in the beginning, so we'll have it right now. There's a man visiting a cemetery and he sees the undertaker. And the undertaker tells him, you know, there's something very special. Beethoven is buried in the cemetery. And he tells him how to find the grave of the famous Beethoven. He goes and is looking there, and he notices that there's some music playing. He goes closer to the grave and he hears, and he was a student of music. He was a world-class musician, and he recognized the tunes. And then he realized after a few minutes that it's the 4 symphonies, but they're playing backwards. So he comes to the undertaker and he says, it's beautiful music playing, but why is it playing backwards? And he says, oh, he's decomposing.
Yeah.
Ow.
Okay.
Good one.
Anyways, so what we have over here clearly is that well, let's ask it like this. The 2 questions that are driving today's lesson are, number 1, why will the Zohar told Zohar told us this? We're going to ask it as a question. Why is it that everybody who lived is going to have to die? And question number 2 is, why decompose them just to rebuild their bodies? Is everyone clear on the questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Questions make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Rabbi Shalom
Thank
found
you,
the
David.
story for us. Thank you, Shalom. Anybody who would like to, anyone who would like to see the actual, let me post it.
Thank you for
In
the
the chat.
reminder.
Okay. So I just posted in the, I want to post this to everyone in the meeting. Here and enter. Okay, I just posted the link. Anyone who wants to read the story inside is welcome to. Okay. Very good. You all hear me, right? Great.
Yes.
So copy that before the end of the meeting, and you'll be able to read the story inside. So the first thing that we have to do to get back to this and to answer all of this is we have to go and visit a completely unrelated topic as we usually do. And that is going to be compound interest. Who here would like to explain to us in one sentence or less the concept of compound interest? Do we have any bankers or investors with us?
You have a housewife?
So the
I
concept
hear
of
you.
compound interest is, to put it the most simply, compound interest is when you are making interest on your interest, right?
Right.
So let's say you put in $100. So your first year you're gonna make, and you're making 10% interest. So your first year you make $10, but the next year you're making interest on $110. So you made $11 interest. The next year you're making interest on 121, and so on and so forth. And that's the way it is with investments. People who start investing young, that's what everyone told me, start investing young. But the problem is, where do you have money when you're young? So you have to invest, but you have nothing to invest. But that's how it works. And then as the years go on, you see that the curve just goes up and up and up, because you're earning interest on the interest. And even if it's only 8%, but after 10 years, you already have, almost, after you have, a few $100 if you put in, and then after 20 years, 30 years, and by the time you retire, you can take out $75,000 a year, and you're not hurting your investment at all. That's the concept of compound interest. Where is the key to compound interest? What's the success of compound interest? What's the magic of compound interest?
Leave it for a while.
Exactly. Not only you have to leave it for a while, but you have to leave it. If you take out your interest every year, you're not going to have anything. And if you pull out your original investment, then you're going to lose everything also. Right?
Right.
The only way this works, Sorry?
As long as there's no devaluation of the dollar to nothing.
Yes, exactly. Well, if there's a devaluation of the dollar, then technically you have even more. Anyways, Shalom can tell us how many kopecks his nephew needs in order to buy a loaf of bread. Griven? What are they called, Shalom? Anyways. And the truth is that this is not only in regards to money, that the way to grow is by growing, by building and capitalizing on what you have and adding more and more and more. The same thing is with education, right? Like Moshe is now having a refresher on the Aleph base, and you start with the Aleph base, and then you add the vowels, and then you add the words and the sentences, and you just keep building on it. And then you can learn the translation of the words, and then you can learn the understanding and the comprehension, and then you can start learning how to read the words because you're already familiar with them. You can read them even without the vowels, and then you can start to read from the Gemara, and everything just builds on itself, and you end up with a tower. Also construction, right? You can't have a 30th floor if you don't start with a foundation. Everything is building on the next thing. That's the way that we view growth. You start with something more small, and you make it bigger and bigger and bigger until it's grand, until it's awesome, until it's massive, until you feel that you're at the success that you want to be. So let's look over here at something fascinating. Text number 2 tells us from the Gemara about Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera was a great sage who lived in Babylon. Anyways, so he lived in Babylon, and he wanted to move to Israel. Now, the yeshivas in Babylon and the yeshivas in Israel were very different, and we're going to learn about that difference in text number 3. But let's first look at text number 2. The Gemara in Masechta Baba Metzia 85a says like this: when Rabbi Zera ascended, he went up from Babylonia to the land of Israel. He fasted 100 fasts. Who knows why he fasted 100 fasts? He fasted so that he would forget the Babylonian method of studying Talmud, so that it would not hinder him, it would not hold him back. What does that mean? Rabbi Zera was one of the greatest minds, so he had to fast so that he would forget everything before he could go to Israel? If he's trying to learn and is trying to gain, it would seem to make a lot more sense for him to study harder and learn more before he goes to Israel. So what's going on here? Let's look at text number 3. This is from Rabbi Shalom Dovber Schneerson, the Rabbi Rashab. The typical way of learning is that by studying one thing, a person then expands their knowledge and is able to comprehend ever greater things, progressing further from one level to the next. And he asks, why then did Rabbi Zera need to forget everything? Why did Rabbi Zera need to forget everything?
Wanted to make himself an empty vessel so that he could learn untainted the way they taught yeshiva in Israel.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. So that's where we're going to go. That's exactly where we're going to go. Which is that sometimes when we hit a brick wall and we can't go around it and we can't go over it and we can't go under it, we have to rethink everything. Rabbi Zera had to forget everything that he knew. And here's why. There's a difference between incremental growth and quantum growth. Even when we have exponential incremental growth, it still pales in comparison to a quantum leap. Imagine the biggest number that you can imagine. It all starts with that foundational 1. And by adding more ones to each other, you're going to get to that new number. Right?
Yehi HaMelech, Yehi HaMelech, Yehi HaMelech.
A quantum growth is when there's nothing at all similar from where you came to where you're going. So let's say exponential growth would be, let's say, we keep on doubling, right? So we have 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and before you know it, you're in the hundreds and the millions. But a quantum leap would be like 1, 2, 4, 8. Here would be like 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 Ferrari. Wait, where did that come from? Exactly. There's no connection. There's no connection between what was before and what is now. That's real growth. That's real change. Let me ask you, think of any two numbers. Which two numbers have the biggest gap? Any two numbers you can think of. Which two numbers are furthest from each other?
1 and 0.
Can either say or put it in your chat box. Anyone?
0 to 1.
Ah, Leib Moshe is our in-house genius. Very good. Because if you take 0 and you take a lot of zeros and you multiply 0 by many, oh, Auntie Nina got it as well. Very good. You can multiply it by 1,000,000 and you'll still have 0. But 1 is a countable number. 1 is a countable number. So that's the biggest change, the biggest jump in numbers. But once we have numbers, it doesn't matter how long you go, how far you go, you're still trapped by the number 1. You're still relative to the number 1, and you will never get away from it. So if incremental growth comes by adding, quantum growth comes by subtracting, by taking away, by getting rid of what we do have now. I mean, let's take, for example, innovations, right? Steve Jobs didn't create the wonderful family of Apple products. He didn't invent the iPhone by taking a BlackBerry and enhancing it. He took the BlackBerry, he tossed it off his desk, and he started dreaming. That's where real growth comes from. Not by building, but by destroying. I heard a quote from Simon Jacobson. I love it. He said, if you think what you thought, and you say what you said, and you do what you did, you're going to have what you had. If we want to change, if we want real change comes not by doing more of what we have. Real change comes from getting rid of what we have. Here's another example. If you ever were trying to brainstorm to come up with a creative way to do something, there was something that you needed to resolve and you couldn't figure out how to do it. And you were trying and trying and trying and trying. Or perhaps, better yet, a concept that you were trying to understand. And you just couldn't get it. And you read the text over and over and over and over and over again. And you just couldn't get it. It didn't enter your mind and you couldn't understand it. At some point, your mind goes blank. You've been trying so hard. You've been working so hard. You're sitting at your desk and all of a sudden your mind goes blank. You're distressed. You're tired. You've worked yourself to the point where you can't work anymore. You've tried accessing the most inner dimension of your soul to bring forth ideas and you haven't gotten anywhere. And then there's silence. And after a few moments of just wallowing in your silence, where no thoughts are coming forth from the innermost part of your subconscious, the answer flashes into your mind and you have a breakthrough like you've never had before. I see Asaf is nodding his head. Asaf Yisrael. Did that ever happen to you?
Oh, yes, but there's also a famous example of a physicist who was on a bus trip through the United States. And out of nowhere came a solution to a major problem of modern physics. It was there, and he had worked on it for years, but he wasn't thinking about it at all then.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So if you want something new, building it bigger, you're just going to have more of what you had before, but you're not going to have something different. If you want something different, you have to demolish and start over again. So now we can look further at Rab Zera. We're going to look at text number 4. This is also from the Rebbe, explaining why Rabbi Zera had to forget everything that he learned. There are two approaches to study. One is in which the student progresses from simpler to more challenging material. At first, they study a simple matter and then something more challenging, and the greater their mastery of the simpler material, the more it will contribute to gaining the mastery of the more challenging material. But then there is another, greater way a person can academically progress. Now, the manner in which progress is achieved in the first way, mentioned above, is only relevant when the two subject matters have relative value one to another. However, when they are categorically different from one another, and the more complex material is infinitely greater than the simpler one, not only will mastery of the simple matter not contribute to gaining mastery of the greater matter, it will actually be a distraction. Imagine you understand the way Excel works for Windows, and you come to a new job and they're all using Mac. They're all using Apple Macs. So you come to a conference where they're going to teach you how to use Excel for the MacBook. If you're going to be thinking about and integrating everything that you know about Excel for Word, Excel for Microsoft, sorry, Excel for Windows, you're going to be completely confused. Not only will you not understand what's happening, you're just going to end up even more confused. The only way to learn the new subject is by completely putting aside what you know until now and being open to receiving what's coming. So let's go back to yeah. Okay, let's go back to the Rebbe Rashab, who introduced us to this concept of Rabbi Zera, and let's see the way he explains the difference between the two ways of learning in Babylonia and in Israel. The study method of the Jerusalem Talmud is to reach a conclusion as soon as possible without too much discourse of rebuttals and answers. So the way that the Jerusalem Talmud works is we have a concept, and we're going to straight away give you an answer, give you a solution, put things together, make things work. The study method of the Babylonian Talmud, which some people say is like the Socraterian method, I'm not sure exactly how close it is, but anyways, it embraces broad discourse and many rebuttals and answers, and only thereafter does it finally reach a conclusion. So while the Jerusalem Talmud glorifies straight shooting and coming to answers and a can-do attitude, the Babylonian Talmud glorifies the process, the questions, the answers, the back and forth, until we finally come to a resolution. In other words, the disparity between the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds is not only the content of their conclusions. In fact, many times they reach the same conclusion. The disparity is in their approach. In the Jerusalemite method, when a student learns a particular idea, he immediately finds a common thread that links it to another idea, thereby comparing many ideas alongside each other. In the Babylonian method, when the student learns something, he immediately looks for the whole. The question, why do we need a numbered list? Or why are the ideas arranged in this particular order? After the student toils to come up with a good answer, he then asks further questions, and only after this elaborate process does he finally reach a conclusion. Accordingly, the Talmud never meant that Rabbi Zera actually went ahead and erased the information he learned in the Babylonian Talmud. Heaven forbid this suggestion. Rather, Rabbi Zera fasted 100 fasts to impact himself and change his very nature, his style of learning, to the Jerusalemite method. Of course, to effect such change, it requires a good deal of work, like fasting 100 fasts. This is an observable truth, and here comes a line that is so powerful for each of us. It is extremely difficult for people to change their nature and habits. So that's why Rabbi Zera needed to fast. Because in order for him to change his paradigm, in order for him to make a quantum leap from studying things the Babylonian way to studying things the Jerusalem way, he had to forget the structure of learning. He had to remove that from his psyche. He had to be able to approach a piece of writing, a piece of literature, and see answers, not questions. See connections, not contradictions. See commonalities, not separations. And that's why he had to fast. So let's put it into modern day stuff. There are two ways of learning physics, looking at physics, right? You have the micro and the macro and the combination of the two. You have your regular way of looking at physics, and then you have your quantum physics. If you learn physics and you go to physics classes, and then you try to come and sit in and listen in to a lecture that's being given based on quantum physics, you're going to have no idea what's going on. You're going to end up confused, and you're going to think that the lecturer has no idea what they're talking about. It's two completely different worlds. And in order to get from one to another, you first have to put aside everything you know from before. Where are we getting to? This is a beautiful discussion about Rabbi Zera. Let's bring it down. Let's bring it closer. Let's bring it home. This is from the second Lubavitch Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe. And he says as follows. This is talking about the souls in Gan Eden. It is impossible to advance from one level to an entirely greater one without an erasure in between, in a way that obliterates the memory and any pleasure of the first level. At that point, the person is ready to advance to the next level and experience the godly delight to be had there. This is the rule when the higher level is categorically greater than the lower and there is no relative value between them. Right? That we've already discussed, that we've already looked at. For this reason, we find that wherever there is a situation of advancement from one level to a categorically greater one, there must be something blocking in between. In Chassidus, we call it, there can't be a yesh to a yesh, you have to have an ayin in the middle. You can't go from one state of understanding to another state of understanding by building. You have to first erase everything that you had. This obstruction cancels the first level to the point that it is completely forgotten, and then it is possible to advance to the greater level. So we're going to bring some examples, make it a little bit more, more tangible. But let's first look at him, what he writes. The soul experiences this when it advances from the lower Gan Eden to the higher Gan Eden. Inasmuch as these two levels are categorically different from one another, the soul must immerse what the Kabbalists call the Dinor River, so that it will not obstruct the categorically greater levels of pleasure to be had in the higher Gan Eden. What does that mean?
But can you repeat that? Your voice cut out.
Sure. From which part? The purpose of this immersion, from going from the lower Gan Eden to the higher Gan Eden, the soul is immersed in a river. And the reason for that is to erase the memory of the pleasure that the soul experienced in the lower Gan Eden, so that it will not obstruct the categorically greater levels of pleasure to be had in the higher Gan Eden. So Leib Moshe was with us when we learned about the journey of the soul. And we learned that the soul, or certain part of the soul, actually gets affected by the body. It starts enjoying sushi and 7-layered cake and all the other pleasures of the world. So if I would ask you, what gives you the greatest pleasure? You would probably have an answer. I don't know if this is the time or the place for it, but you can think about what gives you the most pleasure in the entire world. Everyone has something different. Let's call it 7-layered cake, like Rabbi Josh Gordon of blessed memory. 7-layered cake. And you go and eat 7-layered cake whenever you have a big occasion, whenever you're down and depressed, whenever you have a celebration, you're always eating 7-layered cake. And your soul also comes to appreciate a good 7-layered cake. A person dies. They go up to heaven. Their soul goes up to heaven. And let's say that the angel, because that's the way the jokes go, right? The ministering angel says, okay, it's time for you to come into Gan Eden. Gan Eden is a place of pleasure. What do you want? And the soul says, oh, I know what I want. Imagine 7-layered cake, a full bar of 7-layered cakes all day and all night. I'll take that. Granted. So he goes into Gan Eden and he has his 7-layered cake. And all the souls around him are experiencing a godly revelation. They're experiencing a spiritual pleasure, the likes of which, as we explained in lesson 1, cannot be understood by a physical person. And they're looking at this soul, this poor soul, that the new immigrant. This is what you came for? Grow up. There's a story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov one time said that there was a man who was a wagon driver. He was a big sinner. Every sin under the book he had done. But there was one time that there was a person who was about to die. He was about to be killed. And this wagon driver saved him. He helped him and saved this man's life. So because of that, when the wagon driver died, he was told that he is going to be given a place in the Garden of Eden, in Gan Eden, in paradise. And they asked him, what does he want? He gets to choose his paradise. He says, oh, I get to choose my own paradise? Here's what I want. I want paved, smooth roads, strong, fast horses, well-oiled wheels, and a fast chariot, a good whip that gives a loud crack, and I'll be able to say giddy up or hee-ya or whatever the wagon drivers say, and I'll just be able to go and go and go and drive without any potholes. That is my dream. And that's what happened, my friends. And as far as we know, he's still driving down that road. But is that what we died for? Is that what our soul wants to experience? Is that the greatest thing we can really imagine? So in order to really understand, in order to be able to experience real pleasure, we have to first rid ourselves of our worldly notions of pleasure. We have to forget everything that we know in order to move forward. We have to forget our platters of sushi and our brand new Teslas if we want to see a world of godliness. Is that all making sense so far? Go ahead.
What do you mean by forget? Do you mean just set it aside, or do you literally mean forget it? Because your story with Rabbi Zara pointed out that at first it said he had to forget things, but then you said, oh no, he doesn't have to forget what he knew already. He just has to forget his old method. So that's my problem with what you're saying.
Sure. So thank you for that. To be more precise, we have to set aside, we have to remove our connection. There's a story, Shalom can, he's not here. There was a, remind me about the story afterwards, about removing your connection. Okay, at the end of the class, if we have time for it, please. So to summarize, to pull us all back to speed on where we're holding in the conversation, quantum growth, in order to really take a leap, you have to get rid of what you have already. By continuing further down the same road, you're not going to get to a different destination. By putting more money in the bank, you're not going to get gold. Money and gold are two separate things. You can have hundreds of thousands of dollars and you can keep putting bills in there from today till tomorrow. You'll never end up with a stack of gold. In order to move forward, we have to step backwards, right? So in order to, I guess, in order to think about to think outside of the box, you have to burn down the box. So our biggest drawback as human beings is that we can't let go of our preconceived notions. We can't forget about our paradigms and our old methods. And that is actually scary, the amount that it hinders us. Let me share something with you. George Land in 1968. George Land in 1968. He created the creativity survey for NASA in order to find who are the most creative people to work on their team. And he conducted a research study to test the creativity of 1,600 children, ranging from the ages 3 to 5, who were enrolled in a Head Start program. He gave them the same creativity test that he gave for the NASA employees. The assessment worked so well that he decided to try it on these kids. So he retested the same children at 10 years of age and again at 15 years of age. And I want you to listen carefully to his findings. Among the 5-year-olds, 98% of them passed his creativity test. They were all geniuses, budding geniuses, looking to figure things out in a way that was out of the box. Once they were 10 years old, 30% of them passed the test. Once they were 15 years old, 12%. And when he gave the same test to 280,000 adults, 2% passed the test. What changed? What do you think? Why do you think that they lost their creativity?
They were being
Do we have
held
any
back
school
by
teachers in
their
here?
knowledge.
Yeah, they were. They were being. We keep our old notions and we're scared to change and let go, and it's very scary. It's very vulnerable to let go of what we have and to move forward and to leave go and to try something new and to think about doing things differently. But if we'd just still be making the BlackBerry better, we'd have a BlackBerry with a bigger screen, rounder buttons, and a pinwheel that scrolls this way instead of that way. Maybe even 360. But we wouldn't have the touchscreen phone that we have today. There's one more thing that I want to, two more examples on this before we really bring it home. So there's something called an SRB, which is the Space Shuttle Solid Rocket Boosters. You know those big white things on the side of the rocket that propel it into space? Probably one of the greatest inventions of today, the most modern, sophisticated piece of equipment that exists in the modern times. Am I accurate with that?
Certainly one of them.
Okay. So when they created them in the labs, they were limited to 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. They couldn't make them bigger than 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. Does anybody know why? It's fascinating, and it may just blow your minds and show us how much of a beaver us as the human beings are. Okay? So the reason is, sorry?
Something to do with the way the size of roads or
very good. So they were
roads.
made and manufactured in Utah, and they had to be shipped to the Kennedy Space Station in Florida. And the railroad carts are 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. They had to fit in the railroad trains, so they had to be able to be shipped. So they couldn't make them wider than the railroad cars. 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. Does anybody know why the railroads are 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide? I'll tell you. Because when they started making the railroads in the United States, who built the railroads? The English expatriates. The expats from England were the ones who came and built the railroad system in the United States. And in the UK, the railroads are 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. Okay, so does anyone want to know why the UK has railroads that are 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide? Okay, I'll tell you why. They were built by the same people who built the tramways. And the people who built the tramways wanted to use the same machinery to build the railroads. So because they wanted to use their same jigs, they built the railroads with the same machinery. So that's why because the tram wagon wheels were set to 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide, That is why they built the railroads 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide, so they could keep the same trams and keep the same system. Does anybody want to know why the tram wagon wheels were set at 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide?
Why not?
Why? Okay. The answer is that they wanted these trams to fit in the ruts of the very old long distance roads.
That's crazy. I had added a good amount of water to begin with.
The roads, the long roads that they had ruts in them, grooves. And those grooves were just about 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. So they created their trams to be 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. Does anyone want to know what those ruts were? Why the ruts were made in the roads? Why there were ruts in the road that were 4 feet,
They
8.5
were
inches
wagon
wide?
ruts.
Sorry?
They were ruts made from wagons of the day that horses pulled.
Very good. Those first roads were built by and for the Roman Empire. After all, to expand the empire, they needed roads to transport soldiers and goods. But why did they build rutted roads? And the answer is they didn't. Of course not. Who would build a road with ruts inside it? They traveled by horse-drawn chariot, and the chariots were made to the same specifications, and after a long time, the wheels wore ruts into the roads. Okay, so now we have the final question. Why were the chariot wheels spaced at 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide?
Maybe
Very good.
because 2 horses or something like that.
Very good. The chariot specs were designed for the Roman chariots of the time, which were drawn by 2 horses. And the width of the chariot's wheels needed to accommodate the widest part of the horses, which is their behind. So the ruts just happened over time. So that's right. The most advanced machinery today is limited to 4 feet, 8.5 inches because of a decision thousands of years ago by the Roman Empire that their chariots should be wide enough to fit the horses' behinds.
So you're saying then that the width of the railroad tracks in the United States are built on a premise that is outdated and unnecessary.
That's exactly what we're saying. This is incremental growth. This is not a quantum leap. Because in order to make a quantum leap and to build something entirely new, you first have to destroy what was there. And this goes back to that creativity.
Another type of growth. It's called hierarchical growth. Hierarchical growth.
Okay.
Like in a computer, the hierarchy of each new operating system is based on the principles of the previous one. So there is growth. It's incremental, but it at least has reasons, and it allows people to understand the newer systems as they come out because they're using principles that they used in the older systems.
Okay. Good. Thank you for sharing that. So it's like we're keeping with the same principles in order that you should be able to understand it. Now, imagine if somebody would have come along and been creative, but until you get someone who says we have to destroy everything and start again, we end up with these rocket ships being built to the specifications of the horses behind. That's what it is. That's what it boils down to. So I want to ask you one more question. I'm going to give you an exercise. Can you, in 30 seconds or so, design a table that has no legs? A table that is raised from the floor, but has no legs.
Yes.
Go ahead.
It's hanging from the ceiling.
Very good. You must be one of the 2%.
Oh, I was looking at a chandelier.
Malky, also very good. Okay. So we have lots of creative people here with us, but so long as we're going with the mindset that a table is a flat piece of wood that's raised from the ground, we're never going to move past that. Imagine a table that came from the roof. I mean, my kids bump into the table all the time. Imagine if it was just from hanging from the roof, and then when mealtime's over, you press a button in the wall, it gets raised, put away, and now you have double the room. There we go. Malky likes that idea. I think her kids would like that idea also. Imagine how much more room you'd have.
Yes.
And the studios in Manhattan just doubled in price. So we understand now what incremental growth is. We understand that if we really want to change things and make something entirely new, we have to rip away everything that we had before, or at least the infrastructure, and then we can get to something new. So now let's head
Well,
back.
it's interesting. It's interesting that we don't apply that to halacha.
Tell me more.
That's it. It just occurs to me.
Okay. So we're actually going to get there soon.
Okay.
So if it is 9:32, 9:33, if anyone has to leave, God bless you. Thank you for coming. May you have a great week, and thank you for joining us on this wonderful journey. If you're able to stay a few more minutes, we will be done shortly. We're wrapping this up here. Now the question comes, what does all of this have to do with the resurrection of the dead? Anybody want to guess?
Yeah, we just have to undo ourselves, thinking, our bodies, everything, and be completely remade like Adam Harishon was.
Exactly. And to put it in slightly different words, if the resurrection of the dead is going to be like what we spoke about last week, that it's a real connection, essential connection, our essence with God's essence, something that is completely beyond logic and reason, something that is completely beyond anything that we've experienced until now. We can't move from where we are into that new space. In order to really understand, comprehend, appreciate what's going to happen, we have to first decompose. We have to first be remade. We cannot go into such an experience straight from where we are today. For that new reality, we have to first get rid of what we have. So let's say you take a seed and you put it in the ground. If the seed would grow, what would you get? A really big seed. In order to get a tree, what do you have to happen first? The seed has to germinate. It has to rot. It has to become one with the earth, and then it can grow and blossom into a beautiful fruit tree. So in order for us to really appreciate the revelations that will come as we are one with God in the time of the resurrection of the dead, one with God, one with all our relatives that have passed, we must first forget everything that we remember from this world. And that is why we will all have to die, and that is why all the righteous will have to decompose.
How will we recognize?
That's a great question, Auntie Nina, and I think that goes hand in hand with what Asaf Yaakov was asking before. Do we have to forget everything, all of our memories, or do we have to forget the way things work? I think our paradigms, our infrastructures, our scaffolding is what we have to forget. Our memories, it could be we could keep, but we have to forget the way pleasure works. We have to forget our connection to things and our reward and consequence in order to achieve a whole new level.
Yeah. Okay.
But the new revelations from the higher consciousness might make those old memories irrelevant to us.
It's people and souls. It's not things.
Apologize. Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that we can leave it for later. It's a question of how will we recognize, well, the truth is it's really for now. We will recognize our friends, our families, our loved ones, and so how that exactly fits in may be a good question. The truth is that the soul connection that we have, I mean, is not only because of the way we see people, it's because that there is an affinity and a connection, a soul connection between ourselves and our relatives.
Yeah.
So it could be that we will have that familiarity on a different level, on a soul level, but yes, we will be familiar, and yes, we will reconnect.
Excuse me, also because our souls were created before our bodies were. Going back to creation.
Right. That's true. That's true. So this idea, this concept is not only about Mashiach. It's not only about something when Mashiach is going to come, we're first going to have to forget everything that we know now. This is a concept which applies to us here, to us now, every day.
Yes.
It's relevant to wherever we're feeling stuck. If it's in our job, if it's in our relationship, if it's in our spiritual, emotional, anything. If we want to really make a big change, we have to first undo something that's now. If there's strife and tension in a relationship, to really move past that, if we view our spouse in the same way and with the same faults and the same flaws, and we keep that connection, but we try to move past it, we're not really moving past it. In order to really move past it and build a deeper connection, we have to undo the way we're viewing them and the circumstances that are bringing us to whatever tension there is. If we are spiritually not ready to take on a new mitzvah because we just don't think it's for us, the way we view the world, we think it's going to destroy our lives, we think it's going to be too much of a commitment. That's not, we're never going to grow like that. How are we really going to grow? By pulling away, by tearing away the way we think now about ourselves and that mitzvah and jumping in. Same thing is with Torah learning and Torah concepts. There are certain concepts in Torah that we may find very difficult to relate to. So long as we come with our preconceived, especially in today's day and age, with our cancel culture and certain ideas that are different. If we try to understand the Torah based on that perspective, we may not be able to grasp it. We may have to first get rid of those boundaries and forget that way of thinking in order to absorb what the Torah is trying to tell us. So here's what I want us to take away with from today. Find some mitzvah that you're not comfortable doing in your current scaffolding. Find some concept in Torah that doesn't fit with the way you understand the world. And allow yourself to move past that. Allow yourself to take that quantum leap. Because the Rebbe tells us that we don't necessarily have to die. If we can make that quantum leap ourselves, by putting our own agendas on the side, by putting our own notions on the side, and by forgetting about the way we want things to look and focusing on the way Hashem wants things to look, we can achieve that accomplishment and stay alive and live straight on to the world of Techias HaMesim. May it happen speedily and in our times. I want to thank you all for joining. It's been a wonderful ride. It's been a great 3 weeks. I've enjoyed studying this together with you. I've learned a lot. I hope we now have a clearer understanding of the way Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, is going to take place and what it is all about. I look forward to meeting you on the other side and looking forward to on the other side of Tchias HaMesim.
Right.
On the other side of the resurrection.
Okay. I
And
thought that's what it was.
yeah. And I look forward to seeing you at some of our next courses that are coming up. After Yom Tov, we will be exploring how to outsmart anti-Semitism. We've been fighting it long enough. It's time to outsmart it. That is going to be our next course after the high
Rabbi,
holidays.
is this the last course on the resurrection?
Today finishes our course on the resurrection. Yes, today is the third of 3.
Okay, thank you.
So, wishing you all a very, very happy, healthy, sweet new year. May it be inscribed and sealed for a good year, a sweet year. God bless you and thank you for joining. For those who would like to stay on
Thank
for the
you, Rabbi.
story for George Goldberg, for Asaf Yaakov, about removing our paradigm. Actually, before we go there, anyone who needs to jump off, before jump off, let's go around and informative. Something that you learned, a nugget that you're taking away from tonight's course that you didn't know before. Leib Moshe, can we start with you?
Yes, just give me a moment to formulate the thought in my mind. I'd say what I'm taking away from tonight's course is more of an understanding of what will happen at the time of the resurrection and how we will transform ourselves and how that will ultimately lead to our happiness and our ability to have a happy afterlife and to be close to Hashem. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Leib Moshe. Malki, would you like to unmute and share something that you're taking away from today?
Okay, kind of a more general, just the idea that's comforting that we'll see everyone again who was taken from us here. So just the concept of having Tchias HaMesim, that there is this future, that it's not like all over the here and now, that there's a continuation, that's comforting. And thanks for explaining it well.
Thank you. Thank you, Malki. Leslie.
Yeah, what I got was something that deals with the present, not necessarily the future, but it made me realize that we actually hold ourselves back from understanding certain things and from achieving certain things because of what we have kind of locked in our head as the pattern to follow.
Beautiful.
I hadn't thought about that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Leslie. Auntie Nina.
Well, it's a confirmation that Hashem rules the world. And if we're not going to change our paradigm, Hashem will help us. But unfortunately, with something like COVID, which turns the world upside down, I mean, we certainly have forgotten a lot of things because we're just trying to, I don't know, but I think that's what it's all about. Shake up the world, and maybe the pieces will fall back in a much more just and holy way.
Beautiful.
That's what it makes me think.
Thank you. Asaf Yaakov.
Asaf Yisrael, by the way.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Asaf Yisrael. Thank you for correcting me. I've been calling you the wrong name.
It doesn't matter. So what Leslie said and Auntie Penina said, that really covers it, I think, for me. I don't have anything to add beyond that.
Okay. Thank you. Miriam Simcha, would you like to share? And oh yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. I see you've unmuted yourself, but we can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the point of not destroying yourself, but readying yourself to take on a new approach that sometimes requires cleansing, for lack of a better way to put it, is something very practical even for now. And that's something that I take away. And I'm sure other people have said it, but that concept of changing your view and thereby changing what can come thereafter.
Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Simcha and Nechama, if you'd like to, you can unmute and share something that you enjoyed.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the classes, not only this time, but the other two classes. So the takeaway that I would take away from this whole thing, besides that my little brother is an amazing, eloquent teacher and knows his stuff, so thank you, is that we can do that quantum leap by ourselves right now. And that's our preparation for Mashiach. I think that that's something, I'd never heard that before. And I think that that's really amazing that we can actually sort of like jumpstart that process to Mashiach, and that we know that everybody who was with us is coming back, and that we're so close.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nechama. And thank you for the compliments. So the story of Asaf Yisrael is that the Tzemach Tzedek was once talking to someone. I may be getting some details a little bit off, but anyways, he was saying how this person was telling the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, that there was a man who came with a silver snuff box to the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, the author of the Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe didn't have anything what to do with a snuff box. Everybody, he didn't take snuff, and a silver snuff box, but he wanted to use it. It was a present that was given to him. So this man said he broke off the top of the snuff box and used it as a mirror to see if his tefillin is in the center of his head. Mm-hmm. That's the story that it was told. The Tzemach Tzedek said it can't be. You must be mistaken, and you're off in your story. The Alter Rebbe never broke anything. It must be that there was a hinge that was connecting the top and the bottom, and he slipped out the hinge, and the top came off, and the bottom he was able to use for something else. Okay, that seems like a very simple story, a beautiful story. I was reading a Farbrengen from the Rebbe. It was a Yutes Kislev Farbrengen, I think, or a Sukkos Farbrengen. I don't remember, one of the two. And I wish I could remember the year. Shalom might know it. And the Rebbe mentions this story. And the Rebbe asks, what lesson can we have in our lives from that story? Open your hearts, this is powerful. The snuff box has a bottom and a top. The snuff box represents a person's worldly desires. This man brought his worldly desires to the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe separated the holy part from the unholy part, and redirected the holy part and used it for whatever it could be used in holiness. But you have to be very careful, says the Tzemach Tzedek. The way to switch it, the way to change it, and the way to harness the good is not by breaking. If you try to break them apart, if you try to break apart the holy from the unholy, it will be destructive and it won't work. The way to do it is by finding that part, finding the part, that connection, finding the fine line between the holy and the unholy, slipping out that connection, and then the holy becomes holy and elevated by itself. the way we are connected to our Gashmias, the way we are connected to our physicality, if we try to break that and destroy everything about it, it's not going to work. The way to move forward is by slipping out that knot, that powerful connection that we have. Slip it out, and the Holy will be free to guide us on its path.
Amen.
Thank you.
Rabbi Shmuley,
Yes,
could I just mention before we go
please.
that next week is our Mama's yahrzeit.
Gimel Elu.
Gimel Elu. Yeah, that's next week. So in her Mashiach and together Eden and Aliyah, and it's comforting to know all these things that you've been teaching us, and with real conviction, and I believe it will be so, it may be so this moment, to your dear mother and her mother.
Sorry, say that last sentence one more time.
I said to your dear mother and to your dear mother's mother.
Amen. Amen. And may we see them again very soon. L'chaim, everyone.
L'chaim.
Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you soon in Eretz Yisrael.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Leitov.
Later.
And good Yom Tov, Shana Tova,